The Holy Gospel is according to John, the 15th chapter. Jesus said, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I've said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I've called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you. And I appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commandments so that you may love one another." This is the gospel of the Lord. On this 6th Sunday of Easter, we abide in the farewell discourse. Jesus and his disciples are at dinner. He's washed their feet, announced the betrayal and denial, and implores them not to be troubled, promises another helper for them, and shares his peace. These verses are a part of the conversation Jesus has with his friends to help prepare them for what is to come. It is his goodbye to the people he loves. Jesus is offering comfort, teaching again about what keeping the great commandment to love each other looks like in practice. He is assuring them that they have what they need to carry on in his absence in the next few days and when he ascends to the Father. Today's reading is really the second part of last week's gospel, and some preachers would recommend that we read the entire passage both weeks. So in case you can't recall last week, well, last week was the vine and the branches. This week we hear that abiding in the vine is all about abiding in love. Now, I'm not a huge fan of translating meno as abiding, even though that is what Strong's lexicon does. But for me, the word abiding seems a little bit too archaic. It's a word we really never use, and it feels a little passive to me. The lexicon says that meno means to remain or abide, to sojourn or tarry, not to depart, to be present, to be held, to continue, not to perish, to endure, to survive, to remain as one, not to become another, not to become different. I don't know if I like any of those a lot. My favorite translation is that of my seminary professor, Mark Hoffman, who uses stay connected. And I really like this interpretation because in my mind, it implies relationship. And this is what Jesus is speaking about here in the farewell discourse. Just as Jesus is in relationship with the Father, so too he is in relationship with the disciples, which in turn connects them to the Father. And there just happen to be lots of interesting connections in this passage. Most of them happen in the Greek roots of several of the words that are used. And I like how that root connection connects us to the metaphor of the vine. Connection is something that we really have had to work at this past year of pandemic isolation. And now, as we begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel, connection is something that we are truly looking forward to. Just think of the joy of connecting with someone you have been physically separated from through the pandemic. Hugging your grandchildren, hugging your best friend. Aren't these the times of greatest joy, these times of deepest connection to others? Joy has felt so out of reach this past year because our connection to those we love has been so difficult. And Jesus knows that this will be true for his disciples, just as it is true for us. So maybe this lack of connection has really heightened my connection radar so that I see it everywhere in these texts. But here I find evidence of our boundary crossing God of connection, reaching out with arms open and words of promise, establishing connection with us through relationship with Jesus. And of course, Jesus begins with the deepest connection of all. Jesus begins with love. Agape, outward facing, selfless, sacrificial, unconditional, active love that builds up the community. This love, this connection with the Father through Jesus will bring them joy. Complete joy, even amid what is to come. And here's a connection you can't see unless you're a Greek scholar. Joy and grace are from the same Greek root. The joy they experience in, with, and through Jesus is the abundant grace of relationship with God. This is the love grounded in the incarnation, grounded in this command to love one another as we have been loved. This is love in action, in community, in connection. And Jesus calls his disciples his friends, calls them to lay down their lives, not for him, but for each other. And in the time that this gospel was written, people really knew of two kinds of friendship. Two-way relationships, some kind of inferred mutual obligation. Here, Jesus isn't talking about political friendship, the what have you done for me lately friendship of the patronage system, but what scholars call fictive kinship friendship, something like the love and friendship between family members. And it implies a willingness to defend one's friend, even to the point of laying down one's life. And Jesus isn't talking about dying here, rather about living a life in the boundary crossing love found in being connected to God, the great source of love. Jesus is speaking about setting aside those things that make us see others as different and asking us to welcome all into our circle of love. Laying down one's life was expected of true friends in the time of John's gospel. And what would it look like today if we were willing to lay aside those things that separate us and live into that love? And friends in Greek is also connected to love. Friends and love, philios, filio. Friends might be better translated those who are loved, those on whom you can depend. And this is really important because so many followers in John's time had been cast out of their own communities and families for following Jesus. They were cut off from everyone they had known. Indeed, the disciples left all that they had to follow Jesus. And Jesus knows that soon he will not be physically present with them that they will need to rely on one another. Jesus goes on to assure them that they have been chosen and appointed so that they can bear good fruit. And here's another connection. Appointed and laying down one's life are also from the same Greek root. To put, to place, to fix, to set, or to establish. There are just so many connections in this text. And one must be connected to the source to be able to bear good fruit. Jesus has shared all the Father has told him with these friends and with us. They and we have all that we need. We are connected to each other and through Jesus to God. We are connected in the very same way that Jesus is speaking about. And all of us are members of the body of Christ. And this language of being chosen is not, as John scholar Caroline Lewis points out, a deep theological statement. In this time and place, as a part of this conversation, these are words of promise and of comfort spoken to the disciples and to us, assuring us that no matter what, we are important. We are chosen and loved. Jesus has chosen us. He's made a commitment to us and will remain connected even unto death. And all we need to do, it seems, is to follow that commandment to love each other as we are loved by Jesus. But herein lies the rub. This love is difficult. And all too often we fall victim to our own ideas about who is worthy of our love. We want to choose who to love based on the boundaries we've erected in our lives, because love can be a dangerous thing. And can love really be the result of a command? Maybe we should translate this word not as command, but rather as direction or teaching or maybe guidelines. Jesus has shown us what it means to live a life of love, and we're called to follow his example. And this has been so difficult in this past season, and so many of us are tired. We're feeling disconnected from each other, maybe even cut off from the source of love and great joy that that love brings. All of us have experienced so much loss and have been unable to intercede in concrete and active ways. We feel somehow cut off from the world. But Jesus reminds us that we're never cut off from the source that sustains us, even in the darkest times. He reminds us that he desires us to experience the complete joy that being connected to him provides. Jesus is the way and the gate and the shepherd that leads us. Jesus is the vine, and we have been pruned so that our connection will produce good fruit. We can never fully live up to the example that Jesus has set for us, but we can stay connected to Jesus, abiding in love. In our connection to Jesus, we are connected to the never-failing love of the Father. And through our connection to one another, we are called to share that love. It's all about love. It's all about agape, embodied love in action, not just for those closest to ourselves, but for our neighbors around the globe. We are, after all, the branches that bear good fruit, connected to the true vine that is the source of life and love, rooted in the rich soil of the Creator's never failing agape. Thanks be to God.